everyone. Today I'll show you data types, comments and variables and why we need them. First, let's turn on Python. Control N. Put that here and there. Now in the previous program, we showed you how to make your first program using Python. You remember what it was? We printed out hello world. But that's not the only thing we can print out. You also know that we can print out numbers, decimal values, and even true and false. Like that. Now, what are these called exactly? To us, we know this as text, this as a number, this as a decimal, and these as like true and false, just true and false, just to tell validation, let's say. But what does that mean to the computer? That is, what does the computer call it? In Python and a few other languages, text is called strings. In Python, a string is characterized as something stored in double or single quotes, like this. These both are the exact same thing, but they are stored in different kinds of quotes. The first one being double quotes, and the second one being single quotes. So both of these are text, or what Python calls string. In some other languages, it's also called string. Specifically Java, it is not only a data type, but it's also a class. Same here. It's not only a data type, it's also a class. It's really special. And one reason is that it just can't only store text, as in like words. It can also store numbers in the form of text, decimal in the form of text, and even Boolean values in the form of text. No other data type can do this, which is why the string is really special. Let's try running this. First, we have to save it. So let's do that. Now let's run it. You see, when we used hello world in two different quotes, it returned the same thing. In Python, it's characterized as the same thing. You can use either single or double quotes. In the original Python, it used single quotes. Now in the new versions, it can accept both double and single quotes. In Java or other programming languages, however, only double quotes is reserved as strings. Single quotes in Java is reserved as characters, that is, single letters or numbers. Now, let's say we want to print out something, but we don't want to constantly change the print function. So, to do that, we can use a variable. But what's a variable? A variable is a kind of container that stores a value. It could be any value as long as it's supported. So let's say I have two words, code and juniors, and I want to combine them to create code juniors. How can I do that? We have two methods. First, we can create two variables, text, code, and text2 equal to juniors. Now if I want to print this out, I can just do this, text1 plus text2. You always need to remember what text1 and text2 are. Are they numbers, variables, decimals, or something else? because the plus operand not only stands for addition, but it can also stand for concatenation, meaning the process of joining one string with another. For example, I'll run this. You see that? Code genius. Now, how did I make these variables? It's really simple. I start out by entering the variable name, followed by an equal sign, followed by whatever data I want to store. Like in this case, I'd just like to store hi. But it can also store more than that. Let's see how we can store a number or a decimal value. Or a Boolean value. We can store anything as long as it's supported in that specific language. And then we can print it out. Text, number, decimal, and Boolean. Let's run it. Here we go. Here's our text. This is the same thing we have specified right here. Now, why do we need variables? Well, sometimes you're doing a calculation and you need the variable to store that so that you can print it or use it later on. For example, if you ask the user to input something, you can use a variable to store that. Let's say we have two variables, x and y. We ask the user to input both of them. So let's assume that the user has asked x to be 13 and y to be 10. Next, we could perform an operation where once it gets both x and y, we can just multiply it. 130. This is really useful, especially when you don't need to hard code everything. Hard coding is the process of setting something to be written in the code, meaning there's no option to change it. And if you do want to change it, you'll have to change it in the code. Like, if I wanted to print hi instead of hello world, I would have to hard code it. But with the use of variables, I do not have to do that in the following. You see that? Using variables, we can save time and space. And in the case of a user, we would normally use the input function like this. This is how it's used. It would ask the user for what they want to enter, and then once we enter it, look, we got the same result. Let's try a different one. Look at that. Now, if you wanted to get numbers out of the input, you have to convert it, like to this. But let's leave that for now. Next, we need to use comments. Now, what is comments? A comment is like 1 or 2 lines of text that explains the user what does this code do. To the computer, it actually doesn't even know it's there. When you put a comment, it will ignore that line and then just do the next lines after that. In Python, the way you specify a comment is by putting one hashtag symbol followed by whatever you want to enter. Like for now, for this line of codes, let's enter printing text, or how about printing strings? the computer won't even know it's there. Let's do the same here. Printing different values, making variables, and now with this hashtag symbol, in Python at least, the computer will ignore this when running. Let me show you. You see that? It wasn't included anywhere. The computer has completely ignored it. Now what happens when I don't include the hashtag symbol? What does it do then? It returns a syntax error. It says invalid syntax. What does that mean? In the Python editor, it will show where is the error coming. In this case, it's coming here, where this is there. It's because Python doesn't understand what does this stand for. It's not a command. It's not a variable because you haven't defined it. It's not being used anywhere. So to us, we know it is just some text telling us what is the following code doing. But to Python, it thinks it's a code itself. And because of that, it just thinks that it itself is some kind of code which is incorrect. Which is why we need to put the hashtag symbol. You see that? It fixed the error. Comments are really useful, especially when if you are looking at a code for a long time and then you have forgotten it. Then how would you remember it? You can just use comments to see what does a specific part of a code do. Like for example, when a long time has passed and then I forgot what does this do, and then it says, oh, this does some mathematical operation. Let's say if I specified this comment, then when I look at it later after I've forgotten it, then I can remember, oh, this just takes two values and then multiplies it and then returns that output. So comments are really useful, not for computers, but for humans to understand certain lines of code, especially when we have forgotten what does something do. And variables are useful when we want to store some value so that we can use it later on. So thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you.